Keanu Reeves walked quietly into the brightly lit studio, his calm steps almost unnoticed by the busy crew rushing around to get everything ready. The air buzzed with excitement as the audience filled their seats, chatting about how lucky they were to see such a beloved star in person. Some held up small signs, others just had their phones ready to capture every moment. Keanu, dressed simply in a dark suit, smiled politely at everyone he passed, giving a small nod here, a handshake there. He looked relaxed, but there was always that air of mystery about him, the same quality that made people admire him so deeply. The talk show host was known for his sharp wit and sometimes biting humor. He loved to tease guests, often stepping over the line to make the audience laugh. Tonight, he seemed eager to test Keanu's patience. When the cameras rolled and the music played, the host greeted viewers with a wide smile and high energy, cracking jokes before even introducing Keanu. The audience clapped wildly as Keanu stepped onto the stage. He shook the host's hand warmly, sat down, and waited for the questions to begin. At first, everything seemed normal. The host asked about Keanu's latest film, a thrilling action movie that everyone was talking about. Keanu spoke softly but clearly, thanking the director, praising the stunt team, and humbly pointing out how much of the film's success came from everyone working together. His gentle way of speaking drew the audience in, they leaned closer, hanging on his every word. He was not like most celebrities who loved to talk about themselves. Instead, he always lifted others up. But soon, the mood began to shift. The host's questions became more personal, less about the movie and more about Keanu's private life. He asked about things that had nothing to do with his work, old rumors, past relationships, even comments about his quiet personality. The audience gave nervous laughs, sensing the edge in the host's tone. Keanu, however, didn't flinch. He kept his calm smile, answering politely but never giving away more than he wanted to. He had been in this industry long enough to know when someone was trying to push him. The host leaned forward, smirking, clearly hoping to get a reaction. "You're a bit of a mystery, Keanu," he said. "People say you're too quiet. Don't you think being so serious all the time makes you, well, kind of boring?" The words hung in the air. A few people in the audience gasped softly. Others laughed, not because it was funny, but because they didn't know what else to do. The host chuckled at his own remark, as if he had just said something clever. Keanu didn't react right away. He sat there for a moment, looking at the host with that same calm expression. He didn't look angry, he didn't look hurt. He just seemed to be thinking. The silence made the audience even more curious. Everyone expected him to laugh it off or maybe fire back with a sharp comment. But Keanu wasn't that kind of man. Finally, he spoke. His voice was steady and soft, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I've always thought," he said slowly, "that it's better to listen more than you speak. Life is full of noise already. Maybe being quiet isn't boring, maybe it's just peaceful." His words weren't defensive. They weren't meant to prove anyone wrong. They were simple, honest, and kind. The host blinked, caught off guard. He hadn't expected such a thoughtful answer. The audience shifted in their seats, feeling the weight of what Keanu had said. There was no anger, no sarcasm, no attempt to embarrass the host in return. Just a calm truth that made everyone think. The interview went on, but the mood had changed. The host tried to recover, making lighter jokes and steering back to safer topics, but the audience wasn't laughing as loudly as before. They were watching Keanu more closely now, noticing how he treated every question with respect, even the ones that were clearly meant to poke fun at him. When the host made another sly remark about how Keanu lived such a simple life despite his fame, Keanu just smiled and said, "I think happiness is simple. It's people who make it complicated." Again, the room fell silent for a moment before the applause broke out. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged looks. They knew this was television gold not because there was a fight or scandal, but because Keanu had just shown something rare, dignity under pressure. No matter how much the host tried to provoke him, Keanu stayed calm, kind, and genuine. The audience could feel it. They weren't watching just another celebrity interview. They were watching a man stay true to himself in front of millions. By the time the first commercial break arrived, the audience was buzzing. Some whispered to each other, "Did you hear that? That was amazing." Others simply clapped harder than before, sensing they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered. Keanu, as always, didn't seem to notice the growing excitement. He leaned back in his chair, thanked the staff politely, and waited patiently for the cameras to roll again. It was only the beginning of the interview, but already, Keanu's calmness had shifted the entire atmosphere in the room. The host, who usually loved to be in control, was starting to realize that his usual tricks wouldn't work tonight. Keanu wasn't going to take the bait. He wasn't going to play the game. And that made the audience admire him even more. The host leaned back in his chair with a smirk, thinking he had regained control of the interview. He turned to Keanu and said, "All right, you seem calm now, but let's get honest. People say that you're almost too quiet. Don't you ever get lonely being so serious all the time?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some laughed nervously, unsure if it was a joke or a real question. Keanu's calm presence made the comment feel heavier than it was meant to be. Keanu paused for a moment, looking at the host carefully. He didn't raise his voice or roll his eyes. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if thinking deeply. "I don't feel lonely when I'm alone," he said quietly. "I enjoy simple things: reading, walking, learning new things. Silence isn't empty. It's full of understanding and peace." His words were not only honest, but they carried a quiet power. The audience leaned forward in their seats, listening intently, sensing that Keanu's answer was not only thoughtful but also unexpected. The host's smirk faltered for a moment. He tried to recover quickly, making another teasing remark. "But isn't life supposed to be fun? Aren't you missing out by being so quiet all the time?" There was laughter from a few audience members, but it was weaker this time. Keanu's eyes stayed steady on the host. He smiled gently and said, "Fun can be found in many ways. It doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes, watching the world quietly, noticing small things, is the most fun anyone can have." The audience was now completely engaged. They weren't laughing as much anymore. Instead, they were listening. They realized they were witnessing something different: a man who could face teasing and still respond with honesty and kindness. The host, who was used to guests reacting nervously or with sharp replies, seemed puzzled. He had expected Keanu to feel uncomfortable or maybe snap back, but Keanu had done neither. Trying again, the host decided to push a little further. He leaned closer to the camera and said, "People also talk about your private life. You rarely share details about your relationships or your family. Some even say you're hiding from the public. Don't you think it's strange to be so private when people want to know everything?" The room grew quiet. Even the crew behind the cameras paused to listen. This was the moment the host had been aiming for, the moment when he hoped Keanu might react sharply. Keanu's expression remained calm, almost serene. "I value privacy because it allows me to focus on what is important," he said slowly. "Life is full of distractions. Sharing everything can take away from the things that truly matter: being present with people you care about, learning, growing, and helping others." His voice was soft, yet every word carried weight. The audience felt a strange sense of admiration. They were not only hearing a response, they were feeling the honesty behind it. The host's eyes narrowed slightly, realizing that his usual style of teasing wouldn't work tonight. He tried another approach, this time a bit sharper. "But some people say you're too perfect. You never get angry, you never complain. Don't you ever feel frustrated? The audience murmured. They could sense the tension building, but Keanu didn't. He looked at the host with a small, understanding smile. Everyone feels frustration, he said quietly. The question is how we deal with it. Anger and complaints rarely solve anything. Patience and understanding help more. I've learned that controlling my reactions gives me freedom and peace, and that is more important than showing anger for attention. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. The audience was silent, captivated. They could feel that Keanu wasn't saying this to teach anyone a lesson, he was speaking from his own life experience. The host was clearly starting to feel the shift. He had prepared the segment thinking he would get laughs by making Keanu uncomfortable, but it wasn't working. The audience was no longer reacting to the jokes. They were reacting to Keanu, his words, his calm, and his integrity. The host tried a different tactic. He leaned in and smiled, trying to lighten the mood. All right, so you're calm, quiet, and philosophical. But tell me honestly, don't you ever just want to scream or say something shocking for fun? Keanu's response was simple, but it left everyone thinking. Sometimes it's tempting, he said softly, but life isn't about shocking people. It's about understanding, kindness, and being true to yourself. I'd rather stay calm and kind than try to impress anyone with loud words or actions. The audience erupted in quiet applause, showing that they appreciated not only the words but the character behind them. At this point, even the host began to show signs of respect. He was used to being the center of attention, used to making the audience laugh at the expense of his guests. But Keanu had turned the situation around without ever raising his voice or being rude. It was subtle, almost invisible, but powerful. The audience could feel it, and many were leaning forward in their seats, trying to capture every moment with their phones, knowing they were witnessing something memorable. Keanu then shifted the conversation gently. I've always believed that people are curious about others because they want to understand them, he said. That's natural. But understanding doesn't require invading someone's life. Respect and empathy go a long way, and sometimes silence speaks more than words. The audience clapped again, louder this time. Even a few crew members behind the cameras smiled quietly, impressed by how gracefully he handled the host's persistent questioning. The host, realizing that the audience had clearly shifted their admiration to Keanu, tried one last playful jab. You're too perfect, he said with a grin. Seriously, is there anything you do wrong? Everyone laughed lightly, sensing it was meant as a joke. Keanu smiled back. Of course I do things wrong, he admitted. I make mistakes every day. But I try to learn from them. That's what matters. Perfection isn't the goal, growth is. His honesty and humility silenced the room for a moment, then applause broke out again. By the time the segment ended, it was clear that Keanu had changed the tone of the entire interview. What was meant to be a light-hearted but slightly mocking conversation had become a lesson in humility, patience, and self-respect. The host, though still energetic, no longer seemed in control. Keanu had shown that it was possible to stay calm, respond thoughtfully, and maintain dignity even when provoked. As the cameras cut to commercial, the audience continued talking excitedly among themselves. Many whispered that they had never seen a celebrity handle a situation with such grace. Some were already recording clips to share online. Keanu, meanwhile, leaned back slightly in his chair, quiet and composed, not seeking attention or praise. He was simply being himself, and that authenticity resonated more than any performance could have. This moment, though small in the scope of his career, highlighted why Keanu Reeves was admired not just as an actor, but as a human being. His patience, honesty, and humility had transformed what could have been a tense or awkward situation into a display of calm strength. The audience, both in the studio and later online, would remember this moment for a long time, seeing a side of him that went far beyond the movies and public appearances, a side that was genuine, kind, and inspiring. The cameras returned from the commercial break, and the atmosphere in the studio felt different. The audience was still buzzing from the calm confidence Keanu had shown earlier. The host, realizing he could no longer rely on his usual tactics, leaned forward with a playful but sharper tone, hoping to provoke a reaction. "All right, Keanu," he said, smiling, "let's get serious for a moment. Some people think you're too perfect. Too polite, too quiet. It almost seems like you never get angry. Isn't that a little unnatural?" The audience tensed, expecting a defensive or sarcastic response. The host's eyes gleamed with anticipation, certain that this was the moment he could get a reaction. He smiled knowingly, clearly expecting a dramatic outburst. But Keanu, as always, remained composed. He looked at the host with a calm, steady gaze, showing no hint of irritation or discomfort. "I get frustrated like anyone else," Keanu said quietly, choosing his words with care. "I've faced challenges, disappointments, and moments where I wanted to react strongly. But I've learned that reacting with anger rarely solves anything. It just creates more problems. I prefer to take a moment, think, and respond with understanding." The audience leaned forward in their seats. The studio was silent except for the faint hum of cameras. Keanu's words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. Everyone could sense that he spoke from experience, from a life that had taught him patience and the value of calmness. It wasn't a rehearsed answer, it was truth delivered gently but firmly. The host, slightly taken aback, tried to steer the conversation back toward mockery. "So you're saying you never lash out? You never lose control? That seems almost impossible in your line of work." Keanu smiled faintly, but there was no hint of arrogance. "Losing control might seem natural, but it's not necessary. Control is not about hiding emotions, it's about choosing how to act. It's easy to react in anger, but much harder and more meaningful to respond with clarity and kindness." The audience reacted with a mix of awe and admiration. Some whispered to each other, "He's amazing. He's so humble, yet so strong." Others clapped quietly, impressed by his poise. Keanu's presence had a way of silencing any doubt or judgment, not through force, but through calm confidence. The host, who had been used to being in charge of every conversation, felt a subtle shift in the energy of the room. Trying once more, the host leaned back in his chair and smirked. "All right, Mr. Perfect, let's talk about something else. People also say you live such a private life, almost like a recluse. Don't you ever feel isolated? Don't you get tired of keeping your personal life so guarded?" Keanu tilted his head slightly, thinking for a moment before speaking. "Privacy isn't about isolation," he said softly. "It's about balance. The world can be loud and overwhelming. Protecting what is important allows me to focus on meaningful relationships, work I love, and personal growth. Being private doesn't mean I'm alone. It means I'm choosing how I spend my time wisely." The audience felt the sincerity in his words. This was not a rehearsed soundbite or a celebrity trying to appear profound. This was a man sharing a lesson he had learned over decades. Some members of the audience quietly nodded, relating to his words on a personal level. Many were captivated, realizing that this conversation was becoming something far more meaningful than just a typical talk show segment. The host, sensing the challenge, tried a lighter approach. "So what you're saying is that all this quietness is actually a strategy?" he asked, half joking. Keanu smiled, not with pride but with a soft humility. "It's not a strategy. It's a choice. Everyone has the right to live their life in a way that brings peace and fulfillment. For me, that means being thoughtful before I speak and valuing experiences over attention." For a moment, the studio fell silent. The host, who had hoped to make the audience laugh at Keanu's expense, realized he could no longer control the narrative. The audience wasn't laughing anymore, they were listening, learning, and reflecting. Keanu's calm confidence had changed the tone of the entire room. Then the host decided to make one final push. He leaned in, lowering his voice slightly, and said, "Some critics say you're too humble. That humility is almost too perfect to be real. Don't you ever want to brag or show off, just a little?" Keanu looked at him, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "I don't see the need to brag," he said softly. "People often show off to prove their worth to others, but true value doesn't need validation. Actions, kindness, and integrity speak louder than words. I'd rather be known for being genuine than for showing off." The audience erupted into applause this time. It was spontaneous, not scripted. Some stood up, some clapped with excitement, and some whispered in awe. Keanu's calm and honest approach had turned what could have been an uncomfortable interview into a moment of inspiration. People were not just watching a celebrity answer questions, they were witnessing a masterclass in grace and composure. The host paused, realizing that his usual style, sharp humor, biting remarks, and attempts to provoke would no longer work with Keanu. There was a sense of respect in his eyes now, subtle but unmistakable. He had tried to test Keanu, but instead, he had been tested himself. And he had failed. Keanu then spoke about life in general, extending his thoughts beyond himself. "I believe that everyone has challenges," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Everyone faces moments that test their patience and character. The choice is always ours, to react in anger, or to respond with understanding. Life is easier and more meaningful when we choose the latter." His words were quiet but powerful. The audience could feel the honesty behind them. Some were even moved to tears, silently appreciating the wisdom in such simple statements. After a few more light questions about his work, Keanu shifted the conversation to others. He spoke warmly about his colleagues, the crew behind his films, and people who had inspired him. He praised their dedication, creativity, and kindness, making sure to lift the spotlight off himself. The audience noticed how genuine he was, and the host, though still trying to recover some control, realized that Keanu had already won the hearts of everyone in the room. The segment ended with a round of applause that seemed to last longer than usual. The audience was still talking excitedly, discussing how different Keanu was from most celebrities. He had handled the host's provocations not with anger, but with dignity, humility, and clarity. Even the host, who had tried to dominate the conversation, acknowledged Keanu's calm brilliance with a respectful nod. Keanu smiled, thanked the audience, and quietly prepared for the next part of the show. He never seemed arrogant or self-important. He simply was himself, composed, kind, and deeply thoughtful. This moment had become more than an interview, it was a demonstration of how patience, humility, and honesty can turn even a tense situation into something meaningful and inspiring. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, everyone in the studio from the crew to the audience had a new respect for Keanu. He had not only promoted his film but had also taught a subtle lesson about grace under pressure. People would talk about this moment for years, sharing clips online, praising his calm strength, and admiring the way he could handle even the sharpest provocations without losing his composure. And through it all, Keanu remained quietly humble, focused not on his image but on his own values. In a world where celebrities often react with anger, sarcasm, or dramatic flair, he had chosen a different path, one of patience, reflection, and respect. It was a lesson the audience would never forget, and one that had already begun to inspire countless people beyond the walls of the studio. After the show ended, the audience spilled out of the studio with a sense of excitement and wonder. Everyone was talking about Keanu Reeves, not just as a famous actor, but as a remarkable person who had handled a difficult situation with extraordinary grace. People whispered to each other in small groups, sharing their impressions. "Did you see how calm he was?" one said. He didn't get angry at all. That was amazing. Another added, I've never seen someone answer like that. He's so humble and real. The clips of the interview quickly began appearing on social media. Fans around the world watched the moment when the host had tried to provoke Keanu, and the way Keanu had responded calmly and thoughtfully. Thousands of comments poured in, praising him for his patience and humility. Many said that it was inspiring to see someone handle a potentially embarrassing situation with such dignity. The videos were shared widely, and soon, the story was trending across multiple platforms. People were not just talking about the interview, they were sharing lessons from it. News outlets also noticed. Articles began appearing online with headlines celebrating Keanu's calmness and respectfulness. Commentators highlighted how unusual it was to see a celebrity respond to provocation without anger or sarcasm. They compared him to other famous figures, noting that few could maintain such composure under pressure. Many journalists pointed out that Keanu's response had changed the tone of the show, making it memorable for viewers and inspiring for anyone who watched. The media coverage wasn't just about the interview itself. It sparked broader discussions about respect, humility, and the way public figures handle criticism. People debated how often celebrities face pressure to act dramatically or to respond harshly when confronted. Keanu had shown that choosing calmness and thoughtfulness was not a weakness, but a sign of strength. Social media users created threads and posts analyzing his answers, praising him for staying true to his values, and calling his behavior a lesson in humanity. Fans went even further. Some wrote personal reflections, explaining how Keanu's words had affected them. One person shared that they had been struggling with stress at work and that hearing Keanu speak about patience and understanding had given them a new perspective. Another wrote that seeing him handle criticism without anger inspired them to approach conflicts in their own life differently. People expressed gratitude for the example he had set, saying it reminded them that kindness and composure could be more powerful than anger or pride. Even celebrities and public figures took notice. Many praised Keanu for his humility and wisdom, sharing clips of the interview with their own followers. Some commented on how unusual it was to see someone respond with such calm strength in a world that often rewarded loudness and aggression. Others noted that Keanu's approach reflected deep thought and experience, showing that he was more than just a successful actor, he was a person who lived his values every day. Back in the studio, the host reflected on the interview. He had gone in expecting to be in control, to tease and provoke, and perhaps even to embarrass his guest. But Keanu had handled everything with patience and dignity. The host, though naturally competitive, felt a sense of admiration for the way Keanu had responded. He realized that trying to provoke someone who remained calm and thoughtful didn't make them look foolish, it made him look powerful and kind. Even behind the playful banter, there was a lesson about humility, control, and the impact of thoughtful words. The production team and crew also felt the difference. During filming, they had noticed how Keanu treated everyone with respect, from the camera operators to the makeup artists. He greeted everyone politely, never rushed anyone, and maintained a calm presence that made the entire studio feel more relaxed. The energy on set had shifted because of him. What could have been a tense interview became a smooth, inspiring conversation because of his patience and composure. Fans continued to discuss the incident for weeks after the show aired. Forums and comment sections were filled with admiration for the way Keanu had handled the situation. Some shared favorite quotes from the interview, such as his reflections on privacy, patience, and understanding. Others posted analyses comparing this interview to previous appearances, noting that his consistency in humility and kindness made him different from many other public figures. For them, it was not just entertainment, it was a moment of learning and reflection. Some educators and motivational speakers even used Keanu's example in presentations about emotional intelligence and communication. They highlighted the way he responded thoughtfully to criticism, stayed calm under pressure, and maintained his values in a challenging situation. Many pointed out that the world could benefit from more people handling conflict in the same way, and that Keanu's approach was a reminder that strength often lies in restraint, kindness, and empathy. Meanwhile, Keanu himself remained humble. He did not seek extra attention or commentary about the incident. In interviews after the show, he downplayed the confrontation, focusing instead on his film, his colleagues, and the work that truly mattered to him. He acknowledged the audience's enthusiasm but always redirected the attention away from himself, reflecting the same humility he had shown during the talk show. This only increased public admiration for him, as people recognized that his words and actions matched the person he truly was, not a crafted public persona. Fans who had attended the show in person often shared their personal experiences. They talked about how Keanu's presence felt calming and uplifting, how his voice and mannerisms created a sense of peace even in a room full of excitement. Many said that the interview had left a lasting impression on them, making them reflect on their own behavior and how they dealt with criticism, stress, or conflict in their daily lives. For some, it was an inspirational moment that they would remember for years. The viral nature of the clips also meant that younger audiences, who might not have been familiar with Keanu's entire career, began to see him in a new light. They were not just discovering his films, but also the person behind the screen. Teachers, parents, and mentors used the video as an example of humility and calmness, showing young people how to respond to difficult situations with patience and understanding. Keanu's influence extended beyond entertainment, becoming a quiet but powerful lesson in character and integrity. As days turned into weeks, the conversation around the incident grew. People shared the interview in discussions about social media behavior, celebrity culture, and the importance of maintaining composure under pressure. Many compared Keanu's response to typical celebrity reactions and noted how rare it was to see such poise. His calmness became an example, a reminder that responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively could make a lasting impression. The host eventually reflected publicly on the experience. In interviews, he acknowledged that he had tried to provoke Keanu, but that his attempts had failed. He admitted that the calmness, thoughtfulness, and humility Keanu had shown were remarkable. He praised Keanu for turning a potentially uncomfortable situation into an inspiring moment for everyone in the audience. This acknowledgement further reinforced the impact of the interview and highlighted the difference between provocation and true dignity. Through it all, Keanu remained quietly humble. He didn't boast, didn't demand attention, and didn't let the praise affect him. Instead, he continued to focus on what mattered, his work, the people around him, and living his life with kindness and integrity. His response to the host's provocation had not only impressed the audience and the media, but it had also left a lasting mark on how people thought about patience, humility, and respect in both public and private life. The incident became more than just a memorable interview. It became a story that traveled across social media, news outlets, and conversations worldwide. Keanu's calm strength and thoughtful words reminded people that real influence does not come from loudness or drama. It comes from how you handle challenges, how you treat others, and how you stay true to your values even when tested. For many, this interview became an example of how to live with dignity, compassion, and quiet confidence. By the time part 4 of the story reached its conclusion, it was clear that Keanu Reeves had achieved something remarkable. What began as a simple talk show interview had turned into a worldwide lesson in humility, patience, and respect. Audiences and media alike were inspired, not just by his words, but by the way he lived them. He had shown that true strength often lies in calmness and empathy, and that sometimes, the most powerful response to provocation is simply to be thoughtful, kind, and true to oneself. Days passed after the talk show incident, and the story of Keanu Reeves' calm and thoughtful response continued to circulate. People everywhere were talking about it, sharing clips online, discussing his words, and praising the way he had handled the situation. It became clear that this moment was not just a single interview, but a reflection of the kind of person Keanu truly was. He had shown that composure, patience, and kindness could be stronger than anger or aggression, and that made a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. Fans who had been present at the studio often described how the experience had affected them. Many said they felt a sense of calm just being in the same room as Keanu, and how his gentle words and demeanor left a mark that stayed long after the cameras stopped rolling. Some explained that the way he had answered the host's provocative questions inspired them to reconsider how they reacted in stressful situations in their own lives. They had seen firsthand that being calm, thoughtful, and kind could turn even a tense moment into something positive. The media continued to highlight the story, emphasizing not only Keanu's words but also his actions during the interview. Journalists wrote about how he treated every crew member with respect, greeting people politely, thanking them for their work, and making everyone feel included. This behavior reinforced the image of Keanu as a humble, grounded person who carried his values into every part of his life. Social media users shared stories of his generosity and kindness, connecting them to the way he had handled the host's provocation. For many, it was a reminder that true character is shown not only in big gestures but also in small, consistent actions. Celebrities and colleagues also joined the conversation, praising Keanu for his humility and grace. Some spoke about working with him on movie sets, describing him as someone who always respected everyone, from directors to crew members. Others mentioned how rare it was to see someone remain so composed in a world full of drama, criticism, and attention-seeking behavior. Keanu's example became a topic of discussion not just for fans, but for professionals and public figures who admired how he managed to maintain his values under pressure. In interviews following the event, Keanu remained humble and grounded. He acknowledged the attention but did not focus on himself. Instead, he spoke about the people he worked with, the importance of staying focused on meaningful work, and the value of treating others with respect. He never bragged or exaggerated, and his calm demeanor remained consistent. Fans appreciated this even more because it showed that his behavior during the talk show wasn't a performance, it was genuinely who he was. The host, who had initially tried to provoke him, also reflected on the situation. In later interviews, he admitted that he had underestimated Keanu's ability to handle challenging questions with calmness and respect. He praised Keanu for turning a tense moment into an inspiring one, acknowledging that the audience had learned something valuable about humility and patience. This public acknowledgement reinforced the impact of the interview and highlighted that even those who try to create conflict can recognize and admire genuine strength. As time went on, the story of Keanu's response became a reference point for discussions about emotional intelligence, communication, and personal growth. Teachers, motivational speakers, and mentors used the interview as an example of how to respond thoughtfully to criticism and provocation. They highlighted how Keanu's choice to remain calm and respectful not only maintained his dignity but also inspired others to think about their own behavior. His example encouraged people to consider patience, kindness, and empathy as powerful tools for handling life's challenges. Fans continued to share and comment on clips from the interview, often highlighting their favorite moments. Some focused on the way he spoke about privacy, patience, and understanding, while others admired his humility and his habit of redirecting praise to others. People from all walks of life found lessons in his behavior. Some wrote that they had learned how to handle arguments calmly, others said they wanted to be more thoughtful in their speech, and some simply expressed gratitude for having witnessed such an inspiring display of character. The lasting impact of the interview became evident in how people remembered Keanu Reeves. He was not only admired as a talented actor but also respected as a human being who embodied values that mattered. The interview was referenced in articles, shared in classrooms, and discussed in social gatherings. It became clear that his response had transcended the moment itself, it had left a mark on popular culture as an example of grace, patience, and humility in action. Keanu's influence extended beyond just words. Many fans reported feeling encouraged to act more thoughtfully in their daily lives, whether in personal relationships, at work, or in social situations. They spoke about learning to pause before reacting, to consider kindness over anger, and to approach challenges with calmness and respect. The lesson was simple but powerful: responding with integrity could have a more meaningful impact than reacting impulsively. Even months after the interview, the story continued to resonate. Social media posts and online discussions frequently referenced Keanu's calm demeanor and wise responses. Some called it a masterclass in grace, while others described it as a reminder that humility and patience were virtues worth practicing. The message spread widely, reaching audiences who might not even be familiar with his work as an actor, but who could still appreciate the example he had set. The host, reflecting further on the event, admitted that it had been a learning experience for him as well. He realized that trying to provoke someone who remained composed did not make them weak or uninteresting, it highlighted their strength. Keanu's calm and thoughtful approach had changed the dynamics of the interview, and the audience recognized it. Even behind the cameras, the crew members commented on how rare it was to see such patience and humility, and how much they had learned from simply observing him. Keanu's handling of the situation also reinforced his reputation for being authentic. In a world where celebrity interviews often involve rehearsed answers, defensive reactions, or exaggerated drama, his calm responses stood out as genuine. People admired the fact that he did not seek attention for his composure, he simply chose to act according to his principles. His actions demonstrated that true strength and influence often come from being consistent, honest, and kind, rather than loud or confrontational. For the fans, the interview became more than a memorable television moment. It became a source of inspiration, a reminder of how people could approach difficult situations with thoughtfulness and respect. Many wrote about how they had tried to implement similar approaches in their own lives, whether by responding more patiently in conflicts, treating others with kindness, or prioritizing values over ego. Keanu had not only impressed them as a celebrity but had also left a lasting lesson about integrity and composure. Even in casual conversations, the incident was frequently referenced. Friends shared the story with one another, praising Keanu's humility and grace. Online forums discussed how he had handled provocation, and some compared it to examples from history or literature where calm strength triumphed over anger or aggression. The story had become a teaching moment, a cultural reference point that extended far beyond a single talk show interview. Through all of this attention, Keanu remained the same person. He continued his work, spent time with friends and family, and focused on projects he cared about. He did not change his behavior to meet public expectations or to create a perfect image. Instead, he lived consistently with the values he had demonstrated during the interview: patience, humility, and thoughtful communication. This authenticity reinforced the admiration people felt and made the lessons from the interview even more powerful. The story of Keanu Reeves confronting the rude talk show host and responding with calmness and dignity had become a defining moment in his public life. It showed that true influence comes from character, not drama. It reminded people that humility, patience, and empathy could have a profound impact, and that even in moments of provocation, one could choose to act with integrity. As the years went on, this interview was remembered as one of the moments that exemplified Keanu Reeves' reputation not just as a talented actor but as a remarkable human being. The story was shared, referenced, and celebrated, continuing to inspire people around the world. Keanu's choice to respond thoughtfully, rather than react impulsively, left a legacy of calm strength, humility, and kindness, a reminder that true greatness is often quiet, thoughtful, and deeply human. In the end, the incident was not about a rude host, an awkward question, or a viral moment. It was about a man who chose to act with patience, understanding, and integrity. It was about how one person's calm response could inspire millions, teaching that strength is not measured by aggression but by the ability to stay composed, kind, and true to oneself. Keanu Reeves had shown the world that even small choices in difficult moments could create lasting lessons, and that sometimes, the quietest voice can leave the loudest impact.